This is about importing definitions. You can also import specifications, but I kept the scope today just focused on definitions. We're going to talk about how you do that for brand new definitions. We're also going to talk about how you re-import. We find it's very popular. Clients like to export a subset of their definitions and perform some tasks on those outside of Data Cookbook and then re-import it. So we're going to look at use cases for that and how you want to do that. As we go through this, we're going to go over those fundamentals first so that you just understand at a baseline how the import feature works. We'll also go over permissions. That's also a fundamental. And then in the use case area, we'll talk more about the re-import situations. So also for definitions, there are two kinds. You may not be aware there are two kinds that you can import your own. So I mentioned that earlier, your own stuff, brand new definitions, or things that from your own account you want to export out, perform some global edit task on, and then re-import the set. That's the focus really of today. You can also import or copy from the community, and you could do that in bulk. But that is not the scope. It's out of scope, and I just felt it would bring in too much complexity to today's session. So it is possible to do that, but we're going to just focus on the material in your own business glossary that you create. So what are the steps to import, right? I always want to talk through what are the steps. Well, number one, do you have the permissions to do it? You would need to be in the administrator's user group or have manager or editor permission levels for at least one functional area, for the functional area that you want to import your definitions into. Next, you would prepare the file. We do provide an import template. So you want to get a copy of that template and put your data into that template. As you begin returning back to Data Cookbook, you import that template and there's a preview option. So you can see if you have errors or view your information one more time before you commit the import. And of course, fix any errors that you may have there. And then the last step, of course, is to accept that and commit the import. Okay, so let's demo it first. So I'm going to log in as a user named John, and we're going to import about 10 definitions. And as a spoiler alert, there's corruption in the file so that you can see what that looks like. So let's take a look. So here I am logged into the training instance of Data Cookbook. I'm logged in as John. I'm going to, under definitions, I'm going to navigate to the import definitions area. And so John happens to be an administrator, but if you do not have manager or editor permissions to any functional areas, you do not see the import option from that menu. Okay, so from the main import definitions area, we have some instructional information that it's available to you. Here's the copy of the blank template, and here's a copy of that same template with data in it so that you can see examples. So we'll take a closer look at that template in a minute. First, I just want to run you through the process. John's already got his file. So we're going to choose File. And as I said, we're going to take the spoiler alert, which has a defect in it. So I choose my file there, and then I click Preview. So it's successfully uploaded to Preview, but I've got some problems. So as I scroll through here, so this is a file of definitions about location, campus names, and building names. Very administrative. As I continue to scroll, my error happened to be a definition at the bottom. I forgot to put in a functional area in one of my definitions. So this red communicates to me the error, and it's for the definition above. So and it instructed me as to what to look for. I don't have a functional area there. Notice that my last definition is in yellow, and that is there because it's a duplicate. Interestingly, I'm not prompted for that initially at this import because it's dealing with the error in my import. So first you have to correct the error, and then it will prompt us further to take some action about this duplicate. A word about if you are importing a large file, like 50 or 100 definitions, it can be tricky to find that error. You just have to patiently scroll through looking for the red text that's identifying the particular definitions that are have corruption in the template. So John's going to go off and fix his file, which he miraculously did very quickly. And now we're going to import that new fixed file that has corrected that issue. I'm going to preview the corrected file, and then you'll see that the error message is gone. But I still have this yellow. And at the top here, I now have more information because my errors are gone. It gives me the next level of instruction. And it's asking me, do I want to override existing definitions? Because I do have some in yellow there. And I'm going to choose not to overwrite because in my fictitious example here, I was not aware that I had already imported this. I was not aware that it was a duplicate. So if I've already got it in there, I'm going to trust what I've got in there. So I am going to not overwrite, which that definition will just drop off. It will not import. Second thing I want to call your attention to is unrelated to the duplicates, and that is related to permissions. This checkbox that says automatically approve pending definitions. So if I check this, that's going to bring in all definitions at the approved status level. So if you're super confident with what you're doing and you don't need to move through the workflow, you can have that efficiency option. I'm going to uncheck it now. The only permission level that will see that prompt is if you are at the administrator level. I'm going to back John off of this. I'm going to turn off his admin, and that will go away. So if you are not an administrator, or if you turn off your administrator permissions, you will not see that prompt. So I'm going to accept the file and import. For large files, it is helpful to be able to monitor the import process. There's also, you can go see it on background jobs under the Home tab and also view the status of it. So there we were successful, and under Browse Definitions, there's a nice way to filter by recently created, and that'll pull all those definitions that I just imported to the top. And there they are. So the basics of importing new content is pretty straightforward. The usual caveats apply if you're working with a large set, several hundred. Do a small batch first to test your process, and of course use your test account to initially make sure that you're confident in the sequence of tasks that you need to do. And when you have that confidence, come back into production and finish the work. So that's pretty straightforward. Let's look at the raw file for a minute. Let's look at John's raw import file. I want to show you how the wiki links can be So this one, Susan B. Anthony Dormitory, was imported, and the wiki links were flagged in that raw file, and it picked it up and it made the link. And the thing that it was linked to, main campus, was also in the file. Here's the file. I know this is hard to see. Let's expand it up here. Oops. So this was my import file. You can see main campus was in that load. So my definitions that contained that, you see my use of the double brackets that I manually typed into my import file. For those of you not familiar with that's the syntax. These double brackets is the syntax that you use to create a wiki link. So again, to kind of repeat, main campus is in my list, never before seen in the glossary before. I've created some wiki links to it, and it picks that up and creates the link on the fly. It also links to definitions that pre-existed. There was a couple here that pre-existed. I saw here academic program that pre-existed. Obviously, it picks up wiki links to pre-existing definitions, but it's helpful to know that it'll pick them up within that same import file as well. Okay. Okay. So we did that. Now let's take another look at that template. So you saw that was John's import file. This is what a blank one looks like. And I have expanded it for the purposes of displaying it today. I've tampered with the formatting. I think I made it bold, and I made it larger, and I centered it. Don't tamper it in your own. Just don't touch that first row. It really needs to stay exactly as the template has it, so that the database can understand and parse the data within it. So don't try this at home. But for the purposes of demonstration, it's helpful. So the template is just simply the column names in a CSV spreadsheet or CSV file format. So these are the fields that you can import. You cannot import any of your additional attributes. If you have created those need to be added manually after an import. At the end, there is a grouping of 3 columns that pertain to the technical definition. So the sequence goes technical definition, data system, and time context. And if that's obtuse to you, let's take a quick look at where that's coming from. Those are the 3 fields that are pertinent to a technical definition. If I go into the edit mode of a particular definition, scroll down, create, add a technical definition, right? So here's data system, time context, and then the actual technical definition. Those are the 3. So the template provides you with 2. So you could add 2 technical definitions. Technical definition 1, data system 1, time context 1, technical definition 2, data system 2, time context 2. Okay, fine. If you have more than 2, just expand that out in the template per the pattern. So make sure you go in this order: technical definition, data system, time context, and use the sequential number. I mean, do I know the limit of how it goes? No, but I'm sure it goes up to 7 or 8, which is, I think, the most I've ever seen for a client. So you just expand that out. If you have 5, 6, 7 technical definitions that you want to bulk load, you can do that. And it does not have to be red. Again, don't follow that red part when you do this at home. Actually, I have, so that one was tampered with. Here's what the CSV file looks like in its raw state. It's, it just doesn't display. It's all scrunched. It's very difficult to see and work with, but This is what it looks like, and don't tamper with it. You can make the fields larger, but don't tamper with the size of the things. If you download a sample file, this is what the sample file looks like. And it usually helps to just kind of mess with the formatting a little bit to give it a little bit more meaning there. So there's gives you the name of the definition, a functional definition, just provides the data, typical sample data file of how to put that formatting in. You can have multiple functional areas. You just simply put a comma in between them, no spaces needed. Same with tags. If you want to use multiple tags, no spaces needed, just separate with a comma. The 3 fields that are required are, interestingly, not flagged on the template, neither in the sample data nor in the template itself. Those 3 are the name of the definition, the functional definition, and the functional area. These are required on all definitions, no matter where they're created from, but it's not flagged in the template. A reminder that the 3 fields that correspond to the technical definition become required if you choose one of them. The technical definition and the data system, if you enter data into either of these 2 columns, you have to put it in the other column. They're dependent on each other. And I think you can see the logic there, right? If you are trying to communicate a technical definition, you would, of course, have a data system corresponding to it. The time context is optional. So again, those become required. Technical definition things become required if you use them. If you use one, the other becomes required. So that's what your template looks like. If we go back, let's go back to the Data Cookbook. Let's go back to definitions, import definitions. So there, so if you download blank CSV, that's, I showed you what that looks like, and the sample CSV, we looked at that. I highly recommend that every time you do an import, you just take down a new CSV template. The template is particularly sensitive to spacing and pluralization in the labels of the columns. It's quite sensitive, and you tend to have more success if you just take a fresh one every single time you do an import. Use of a text editor to view your, if you do run into problems in your import of errors, you can view your import file through a text editor. Sometimes will surface unexpected cryptic characters that got put in somehow. If you're copying, if you use copy paste to populate your file, that can sometimes contaminate errant characters. You can find those using a text editor. And if it just continues to be problematic, just submit a support ticket and somebody at iData will take a look. We can usually find the issue pretty quickly and get you back on track. And then below, there's just some further explanation here of each of the columns. It's nice to have it handy on this page. All right, we talked about that. As I mentioned, you can import if you have one of these 3 permission levels for at least one for the functional area that you want to import for. And the administrator has the additional power of the ability to automatically approve upon import. All right, so I'm going to pause there. I see there's a couple questions entered there. Is there any questions pertaining to that basic stuff? Okay, just folks identifying. Thank you, Trina and Mark. Okay, let's move on and talk about some use cases. So doing the new, right? That's what you saw me do with John. Well, that's helpful. It's particularly helpful. Let me back up and say it's difficult to bulk edit in Data Cookbook. Feature-wise, it's not supported well. It's more geared towards working with a single definition. If you want to edit a group of 6 definitions that are related to each other, so you kind of want to work with all 6 of them and see them all 6 on screen at the same time. Even if you used a tag to create a set of those definitions, it's difficult, and they would then all display here, but it's just difficult to edit them. You have to pull them up one by one and then return back to your list of tagged browsed items. It's difficult. So to download, create your set. So let's, you would do that. Let's do, actually, let's just pull down I don't have a large set here. All the definitions in functional area of admissions. There's 9 of them. Whatever you can isolate as a browse search result, you can download it as in that CSV template. So you could use your functional area, you could use a tag, you could use your classification, whatever. Any of these filters will capture a subset and let you download it as CSV. So that can be a nice way to capture a group of definitions and then take them offline, do your editing, and then you have to re-import. So I call that the export import, a little bit backwards, but that is what you're doing. Bulk editing towards related definitions is one thing. Sometimes you'd want to do that to utilize a new workflow. For those of you familiar with workflow, if you have created a new one, you might want to push definitions through that new one. So you would export, and one way to do that is to export the definitions, put the new workflow in place, then re-import the definitions, and they will hit the new workflow. The third example, aside from bulk edits to the functional area or other sections of the definition, sometimes definitions, the technical definition isn't ready, or people aren't prepared to do it. So that comes later, maybe months later. So that's a common reason to bulk. I mean, it is bulk editing, but it's a specific kind of bulk editing, I guess. So those are some reasons of why you would export import, and it's, as I said, it's quite popular. So you're in that position then of duplicates, right? If you've exported and now you're going to re-import, you've now got duplicates, assuming that your edits did not change the label of the definition. So the Data Cookbook uses uniqueness, measures the uniqueness of a definition by the label of the definition, the name of the definition. So again, assuming you didn't change the name, you're now re-importing potential duplicates. So that logic around the overwrite and the do not overwrite gets tricky. And I'll talk you through it here. Some of it's unexpected, but I encourage you to obviously read the documentation and practice it, and be very clear yourself with what is happening in your own work, just to make sure you accurately get the result that you want. So we're going to go through this twice, once conceptually, and then once we're going to look at some examples. So on the left column here, I've identified at least 6 different kinds of definitions. So I've got just a baseline approved definition, a baseline in progress, somewhere in the workflow but not approved. I've got a definition that utilizes HTML formatting. Maybe there's a table, maybe there's some bold that was used in the functional definition. And I've got that in both flavors, approved and in progress. My third example is for enterprise clients that may have attached a quality attribute to a definition. Again, same flavors, approved and in progress. So what happens if I have those flavors of definitions and I choose overwrite? Well, if the definition's approved, it versions and the edits are reflected in the new version. If the definition is in progress, the new edits are reflected in that in progress version. If there's HTML formatting in approved, a new version is created, and unless you syntactically wrote in that HTML formatting in your import template, you lose the HTML, but the edits will be reflected. So it's going to review that. You got to manually put in the HTML in the file. Sorry, I'm on a new keyboard here. You would have to manually put it in, type it in here in the functional definition, put that HTML in there to accept that re-import. For HTML in progress, you also lose the HTML and your edits are reflected. For quality attributes, new version is created and you lose the quality attribute. And same thing for in progress, you lose the quality attribute. So there's some, you can lose information there. Okay, if you choose do not overwrite in approved, you get a new version. So it doesn't override it, but it does create a new version. If you have an in progress definition, there's no change, nor are your edits reflected. HTML approved status, you get a new version, and the format is preserved. HTML format in progress, there's no change, obviously because you did not overwrite, right? And in quality attribute approved, new version, quality is not preserved, so there's inconsistency there. In HTML it is preserved, in quality it is not preserved. And then in quality attribute in progress, there is no change. So for do not overwrite, it logically makes sense. If the thing is in progress and you say do not overwrite, it doesn't change. It shouldn't, you didn't overwrite it. If it's approved, it versions it, and if you have HTML, it preserves it, and if you have quality, it is not preserved. So let's take a look at what that looks like in real life. Here's the same chart, but this time I've plugged in some specific examples of definitions to look at. So I'm going to move that over onto my other monitor and go back to the Data Cookbook and bring those definitions up one by one. So actual financial aid was approved sorry, let me back up and talk this through. This is a definition that is approved. If you re-imported and selected overwrite, a new version would have been created. Version 2 would be created, and it would be at the first stage of the workflow. If you were to re-import for academic advisor, so this one is in progress, and you re-imported and overwrote, your edits would be reflected and it would still stay in the review stage. It would not move along the workflow. Let's look at academic rank. If I choose to overwrite, import and overwrite, So here I've got HTML formatting. I've got some bold, this is just random bold that I put in as an example. I've got some bold there, and I've got a table that I use the HTML. If I were to overwrite this definition on a re-import, I would lose the bold, I would lose the chart, and the data would just appear there in a in the text, kind of a lump there in this new version. And academic calendar also has HTML formatting, and it is unapproved. So if I were to overwrite, my HTML would be preserved. There's my chart, there's my bold. Let's look at a quality type, and this is for enterprise clients have the ability to put a quality type in. So here's admit type. There is a quality attribute here. So if I chose overwrite, create version 2, and it would wipe out my quality attribute in version 2. If I chose a definition with quality attribute that was in progress, it would also wipe it out. So let's walk through those now. Same set of definitions, but now let's talk about the consequences if I choose do not overwrite. So if I look at actual financial aid and do not overwrite, this is an approved version, it would create a second version. It wouldn't overwrite the first version, but it would create a second version. Academic advisor is unapproved, and so there would be no change to this definition. I say do not overwrite, and there would be no change. Academic rank has HTML and is approved. And if I choose do not overwrite, it would create a new version and it would preserve the formatting. Academic calendar. This is HTML formatting in progress, and there would be no change. Admit type, quality attribute, approved. Definition status is approved. There's my quality attribute. So if I re-import this and do not overwrite, I'm going to generate a new version, and I'm going to wipe out my quality. Academic division is the counterpart, which is has a quality rule, is not approved. If I overwrite this, there would be no change. I would retain my quality things. So bringing that slide back, I know that was a lot of kind of detail there to go through that pattern, but and you will, when Jim posts the information tomorrow, you'll have this chart available to you to take a screenshot of if you wish. I think in summary, I would say that you should use the do not overwrite when you want to you have a lot of duplicates and you do want to version them because all of your approved stuff will version into the new one. I would recommend using overwrite when you want to commit the global edits. So you do want to create global edits and commit them, but you have to ask yourself, if you do use a lot of HTML or quality attributes, where is more work? Or what work do you prefer? Because if you overwrite, you're going to lose those things, but you presumably benefit from the bulk edits. And then you have to redo your HTML and your quality attributes. If you don't want to redo your HTML or quality attributes, don't use the import. You have to touch each definition to make that specific bulk edit. And I think to some extent it's just a personal preference. What work would you prefer to do? Sometimes it might be a question of the volume of work. So those are the thoughts you want to think through, or the issues you want to think through when you are working with import at a high volume. In summary, I mean, we started out with very straightforward, simple import of new information, new definitions, and you want to use the import template to do that. Reminder that the people in the administrators users group can approve upon import. If you are having problems with error messages on your preview file, try viewing your template through a text editor. And if that doesn't work, just submit the file to the support, Data Cookbook support, and we'll take a look at it for you. Use the overwrite feature carefully when re-importing. Plan your export and import process carefully. Do a lot of test runs. And then there's more detailed summary of what I've mentioned here in the admin or the user guides.